So thank you for joining us on this Thursday, which is, what is it? It is August the 19th. And I'm talking with Brianna Cartwright. And before we get started, I want to tell you, for the folks who have not been made aware about 1,000 Women Strong, 1,000 Women Strong is an organization founded by Black women for the purposes of centering Black women's issues. And we're going to be doing different campaigns and talking about different issues that affect Black women, Black women's families, Black women's children, and the communities in which we live in. And so the current campaign that we're working on now is student loan debt. So for those of you who don't know, Black women disproportionately carry more student loan debt than any other demographic. And so what 1,000 Women Strong has been doing is having a series of discussions. We'll call them discussions. We're not going to call them town halls because they're just informal discussions to talk about the effects of student loan debt on varying demographics within the Black women's demographic, right? So you have millennials, you have Gen Xers. I talked to Black entrepreneurs last week. And so today we're going to focus our conversation on millennials. The first conversation was on Gen X because I'm a Gen Xer and I have student debt. So I shut it off first. So today we're going to start with Brianna Cartwright, who happens to be a millennial. So I'm going to ask her to introduce herself, and we're just going to talk a little bit about her experience, her college education, and how student loan debt has impacted her. Brianna.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Nicole, and having this experience, because it's something that's been near and dear to me, and a huge focus on this current platform, since now we have the people in place supposedly to push this forward. A little bit background of me. I am in politics. I work heavily in politics and worked really hard during the War Not campaign to make sure that we had majority in the Senate. And so I think now is the time for us to push which issues are the most important to us. And one of the issues as a Black woman, as a millennial, is student loan debt, and gaining awareness around this so we can get the policies that we need to put in place. And specifically about myself, I am from Michigan. I'm the granddaughter of a Michigan state senator, and he directly worked with Walter Reuther in the formation of the UAW. So at a young age, I was very much influenced by labor. And so I decided to go to Cornell, which is one of the few law schools that still teaches traditional labor law. And so I focused a lot on my labor background. To cut the story a little short, I got exasperated by the institutions within, and I went straight to the problem and created To Build the Bench, and been working in politics since. And so, like I said, very focusing on still labor and workplace issues, voter education, the minority workforce, and really making a better place for us.
That's great. That's awesome. So I heard you say Cornell. Did you go to Cornell for undergrad and for law school?
No, I went to undergrad at Occidental College in Los Angeles.
Okay. And so let's get into it. So you have student debt.
I do.
Okay.
And I was very blessed because I do not have undergrad student debt. My student debt is from law school. Okay. And if I didn't do the federal application, I would have had at least $1,200 a month that I had to pay back for my student debt. And you know, it's kind of you know, you seek out this education, right? Especially as a Black person.
Yes.
We are taught at a very young age. Education is the key to opening the doors, climbing up, ladders for, mobility, economic mobility, and so forth. So you always want to achieve your highest. And as many people know, Cornell is an Ivy League school that's supposed to open other doors, and so forth. And so there is, there's a question of, okay, well, why didn't you just go where the full ride was for law school?
Mhm.
I knew I wasn't going to go past law school. And so I wanted to get the best education I thought and the most opportunities to do and then fulfill my dreams.
Mhm.
Like I said, which was focusing on labor and bettering our economy for our community. And
Mhm.
I thought that was the best. Fortunately, for college, I decided to go where the money was. And so I just, thought it would come through. Several things happened. I think one of the main issues that I've seen is also, which many people know, that the pay for Black women are not equal.
Yes.
And so even when you get some of these opportunities, you're
Mhm.
not even getting paid the same, but you still have the same amount of debt.
Yes.
But even further, because of the debt, I've had to make certain decisions based off of money and not solely now anymore on the dream, right? So I might take a corporate civil litigation so then I can do X, Y, and Z,
Mhm.
and not be able to, you know, stay labor, which doesn't pay that much, So there's a lot of the hard decisions, and at the end of the day, uh, one of the main ones
Mhm.
as someone in the 30s is buying a house.
There you go.
Uh, I pay more than $2,000 a month on rent,
Mhm.
and that for anybody else is a nice mortgage.
It is.
Um, but the issue is, and fortunately during COVID, a lot of things changed,
Mhm.
to be able to then save and having stimulus checks and so forth. And honestly, because I haven't had to pay back student loans during this time, I have been able to save money for a down payment. That is,
Mhm.
um, the market is awful. So people are like, well, why would you buy this? This is awful. My parents lectured me, this is awful. And I said, yeah, but you know what? I'm paying triple the amount in
Mhm.
rent. And if you add up of all for the last decade I've paid, that I could have a gorgeous $1 million mansion. Like it's just not something that's sustainable.
Mhm.
Um, and I've been blessed to never miss a rent payment.
Mhm.
And even during the pandemic of, a lot of people having issues of losing work and stuff, I have been very blessed in that situation.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, all of that money could
Yes.
have been spent more,
Mhm.
properly. And so it's not that I didn't have the money, it was really what was set up because of having to pay those payments and rent and et cetera, car note, all of it together,
Mhm.
and not really having a break from. And once again, I'm very, very blessed. So I got, so when I graduated from law school, I
Mhm.
went to work for a union side labor law firm. I got the offer before I finished law school. So
Yes.
I went straight from undergrad to law school to a working job. So I didn't have any gap.
Mhm.
So I did start generating income to try to start paying off the loans.
Mhm.
But because it's so high, it wasn't sufficient, and it didn't allow me to even really start building up
Yes.
to save for my first job to be able to get all these other things that at my parents' age they had.
Did they give you a little gap, a little time to get acclimated to the workforce? So like in my day, you had like 6 months or to a year, and you could keep deferring and playing that game, but did they give you that time?
So I did defer a little bit, but I deferred because I was studying for the bar, and I took that money to pay for my expenses in between to pass the bar and so forth. And so by that point, I couldn't defer anymore, and and then I was in. So that was it. I had to take that time to actually, because you have to pass the bar in order to, even though I had the offer, and so I took that time to concentrate and study. And I only had, and the bar was expensive in itself.
Mhm.
And I only had to take it one time. But just, the living expenses and so forth in between that time is something that you have to have. So,
Right. Right. So, what I think I heard you say was, and this is the common theme, a lot of people got scholarships undergrad. It was the graduate studies that got them. And I think I heard you say that you chose Cornell specifically for the networking and the fact that it had the program that you wanted to go into. Had you not, if you wouldn't have gotten student loans, would you still have gone to law school at Cornell?
If I didn't get student loans,
Yes.
I don't think I would be able to. I know the answer is no. No.
Yeah. So which is the running theme, right? People wouldn't have been able to go to their school of choice had they not gotten the student loan. So that's another common theme that we've been seeing. Would you recommend to, family member or friend to take out student loans? And if you did, what would be your recommendation to navigate that? Or if you didn't, what would be your recommendation?
That's hard. I reflect on that, and hopefully I get better by the time I have kids. Hopefully the system gets better by the time I have kids in this situation. I don't know. I've been fighting with myself with that. Whether, because in undergrad, it was the best to make sure that you went where the most money was. When you get to a certain point where graduate is supposed to literally specialize you into what you want to do, I still feel I'm still not there to say forego that and go where the money is still. But there's some part to it. I will say this. Like I said, I went with the firm, but originally I worked previously with the NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board. And when I graduated, they originally offered me, because I did my 3L year, I think, was it 3L year or 2L year? Can't remember. But one of those years I worked with them and I did their program. I did a semester at the NLRB. They extended the offer as well, which I was leaning more towards. But there was a freeze. There was a hiring freeze that ended up happening when I was graduating. The economy is back to being in shambles, and the times that I'm supposed to take opportunity to grow and become part of a productive member in this economy. And so that's kind of how I also made a decision to have to segue into the firm life. And so with that, even with the NLRB, if I worked, which I think is outrageous that it's 10 years, I think that needs to be reduced. But if I worked for 10 years, then my loans could have erased. So it wasn't that I wasn't interested in public interest, because I went in there with a big heart to want to get things done. And even with the campaigns I work, those technically to me are public interest, but that's not classified under what's forgiven. And
trust me, I work for the American Federation of Teachers, and I was like, does it say anything that if I work for the people?
No, it doesn't. And so it's like, okay, well, I don't qualify. And so there's many things, and even with the proposal I see that comes out of changing or loan forgiveness, I don't qualify.
Most people don't.
And so it's just like, it's frustrating. So it's not that, I wasn't trying to be greedy. I wasn't, trying to say, okay, I wanted to work at Cravath or Skadden and collect my money and not give it back. It wasn't any of those situations. And I will say, at my first firm, I was the youngest attorney. I was the only Black attorney. I was the only woman attorney.
Wow.
And I was a Black woman. So clearly I was the only Black woman attorney. So there was a lot of play in that. And I transitioned from doing labor law in New York to doing labor law in Florida. And then transitioning from that, I had to do a lot of public sector labor because that's what was predominantly, because in the Constitution, the Florida Constitution, you're unionized if you're a public official. So, which other constitutions are different, but so it was here where unions aren't that popular, at least, with the public entities that you're representing them. And so I represented the police, I represented the firefighters, and other things. But within that, they're institutions. And as the Black woman, I ended up having difficulties with these institutions. And so that's when I transitioned and worked for the Hillary Clinton campaign. And we all know what happened there. So from that point, she lost. I could go into that and how that made me feel.
That's another discussion.
We have Biden now, so I guess we're over 2016. But it's affected my life and my choices. And so straight after that, instead of going back into union side labor law, I went where I could pay my bills. And once again, I was very fortunate to not skip a beat. And maybe that's because of my Cornell law school background. They'd be like, oh, she stood up and we could put her here and here. So I ended up doing mergers and acquisitions. And that was paying my bills, and I didn't have any stop in it. And I wasn't happy, but I was surviving, and I didn't have any workplace issues or anything like that, because as long as you got your work done, it was a much bigger firm. There was little diversity. They just cared about you bringing in the money and
the bottom line.
Yeah. And so it was a totally different experience, but it wasn't as fulfilling, because I always had, just because of my background, I just always wanted to give back. And so I was making all this money, and I could give back to the institution that made me to even have the job, but not to my Black community, not to building to the community at all, and bettering it. And so within that, I stayed for a while because, like I said, it was good money. It was the quickest thing I could get from the Clinton campaign. And as you know, also being in politics, it's very cyclical. And so I stayed there. And then 2 years later, another campaign came around and was like, oh, you should get involved. You should get involved. I said, oh, nope, I've learned my lesson once. I'm staying right here.
It's like the mob.
It is. And so I was like, I'm just going to donate to you. I have that now. Now that's how I'm giving back. Here it is. And then I decided to, then I found some other issues. So then I ran and became a DNC member. And I was like, okay, I can help the structure while still working here, because I don't think many people know DNC members do not get paid. That is a volunteer job.
You know that.
Yeah. So, to be able to fly and do this and be there, I had the capacity because of that job. But I felt like also then I wanted to get more in the trenches and make sure not just giving my money, but make sure my money was given right. And then I just got consumed back. And
it's the mob. Always calls you back. You say, I'm getting out. I'm never coming back. And you come right back.
Yeah. It's because friends usually ask. And then when they ask, I'm like, I'll help you. And then it just kind of rolls and rolls. But yeah, it's been challenging. It's been challenging. And I think there's many ways that it can be changed. Give
me an example.
Yeah. So, Robert, who graduated from Cornell, a great guy, talked with him a couple of times. He, at the graduation gave that class, rid of their loans. That was great, right? But what about the other people? And there's other schools that have given forgiveness. I haven't really, and this is just off of my thoughts. I haven't really tested it. It hasn't gone through the quote unquote good political science to uphold it. But I think something like a system so let me start this off. I'm aware that some jobs are able to pay back your student loans. And they try to give those jobs incentives to do that. Clearly, that's not working. What I do think, if the school was more responsible in aiding in that process, it would be better. And the school is not going to really want to say, because that's how they're receiving their money, not just in endowments, that, okay, we're just going to get rid of this, because they still need to survive. And that's part of the business. But if they said, you have like 5 years, right? Or they wanted to say 10 years was short enough. So, okay, 10 years or whatnot, right? Say we're only giving back the 10 years, and we're only giving back the 10 years 10% or whatever percentage, of the income that student receives.
Okay.
I think that would encourage the school to be more hands-on, to make sure they're in that proper job, to receive as much money as possible, because after this point, they don't receive any money. They want to want their students to be the best that they can, and they wouldn't waste somebody's money, right? Because you get the percentage of whatever they poured into you that you're giving back.
Right. To make sure they're going into the track that they went to school for.
Correct.
Which a lot of us have not done.
Correct. Or they did and had to not, and
the money,
etc. Yeah. So I think that would be a true incentive, because the onus would be on the school, and that's how they collect their money. And they would work more hand in hand with businesses. And I think, or, create programs, or, I mean, they would have to get creative with it. But I do think that's a way, if we created that, it would be beneficial, because then after 10 years, you're in what supposed to be your career, and they've set it up and go and flourish, and that's your money. You gave back 10 years, 10%. That should have been how much it cost for you to receive that.
That's interesting. Some folks have argued that education should be free, but we know that, like you said, it's a money-making endeavor. So it sounds slick, but we live in a capitalistic society, and so we have to be creative about how we navigate those capitalistic waters, because that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I could say, great, education should be free. Like I said, so I think that's two separate things, right? Where do we draw that line, right? Are we saying public education is free for college? Okay, I still wouldn't qualify. So I've personally been to private school all my life, from pre-K3 all the way to law school. And it doesn't, and especially when I was younger, I went to several different private schools. It wasn't until third grade I stayed at the same private school, because I was trying to find one that fit me and my learning. I don't think it's necessary to say that you have to go to public school. I really benefited in small environments, and that was just me. Some people, it doesn't matter, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that having something blanketed doesn't necessarily work, but it could still be the same issue. And so for me, that's why I say, I'm not against free higher education. I don't see how that they're going to work it out. I haven't seen the Warren plan where it could be 100% free education. And if there's not a plan for it, I don't believe it. So, I mean, it sounds great in theory, but I just don't see how that would happen, especially with how many options we have here in America for education. Do we say it's only going to be community colleges that's going to be free? Then if people, okay, so they get free college, but they want to be doctors, they want to be lawyers, they want X, Y, and Z, that's problems still exist. For doctors who have to go through COVID right now, right? Like, we needed the doctors, we needed the nurses. There's still some states, Michigan, one of them, they've done a forgiveness in regards to that. But there's some other states who haven't. And it's like, we needed these people. We need more of these people.
Yeah.
Our hospitals are overrun. And the burden is really on the person who decided to be the doctor, even though we need doctors. And there's not really a system put into place to help that. Because, you know, they'll say, you know, once you get to this point, or if you go into surgery, whatever, you're going to make all this money. And so you should be able to pay your, but it's that transition. Like when people are in residency, they have no money.
Nope.
And so, and they have all those bills. So it's just the way that our structure is set up in America, it just really doesn't allow us to advance and properly sow into the communities that need to be sown, because of how limited they've allowed people to grow and who grows. Because even after that, I mean, medical world, that doesn't exist as much, but if we go back into like the business world, Black women are the least likely to be hired.
Yes.
Right?
Even though we seem to be advancing more quickly in terms of our degrees and education and so on and so forth.
Right. So we're educated, but you know, the white man is going to get hired over me, but we have the same education and the same grades. And so with that, you know, it keeps the cycle going, right? It's like, once again, because the schools in itself are an institution. And so if you know that you have to pay the same amount as John, but receive
less pay,
why don't I get to receive less percentage? So with my thinking, if we went the percentage route, okay, I receive less than John, so be it. But I also pay less to you than John. I don't want to pay as much as John if I don't receive as much as John.
I keep hearing the echoing every call about reparations, and it sounded a little
that. We can work on that. That's not as fairy tale as free higher education. I do believe it's time for reparations.
But this is what echoes when we have these conversations. You cannot help but to think of the word reparations, right? And what that means. And so when we talk about reimagining what this could be and how we can make the world more equitable, particularly for Black women, because that is our focus, 1,000 Women Strong is about Black women and centering us, then these are the conversations we have to have. So Brianna, as I knew you would be a wealth of information and very engaging on the topic of student loan debt. And so I will be calling on you probably again in the near future to talk some more about this and to get your story. So for those who aren't familiar, again, 1,000 Women Strong is about centering Black women's issues, and the current issue and campaign we're working on is student loan debt. And what we're trying to do is not just have conversations, but we know conversations and telling our stories is important because it allows us to push the issue forward. But in that, we're having a campaign through the end of September to get 10,000 signatures out of Michigan. We want to get 100,000 nationwide, and we're targeting 5 states for 50,000 signatures. And so Michigan is one of those states. We're targeting for 10,000 signatures, and we're asking folks to go to cancel, the word cancel, 50KStudentDebt.org to sign the petition. Please do that and spread that to your friends after you sign the petition. Make sure you spread it to other folks. We're also asking you to stay abreast of this current campaign and other campaigns as they come up at 1KWomenStrong.com. That's 1K, women spelled out, strong spelled out.com, and sign up so you can be alerted about what we're doing and how we're progressing. We thank you for coming on to these talks on Thursdays, and look out for more upcoming talks that we will be having to discuss student loan debt from a varying perspectives from Black women. So thank you again, and God bless and good night. Bye, everybody.